ويعذب المنافقين والمنافقات والمشركين والمشركات الظانين بالله ظن السوء عليهم دائرة السوء وغضب الله عليهم ولعنهم وأعد لهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا. ولله جنود السماوات والأرض وكان الله عزيزا حكيما. إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا لتؤمنوا بالله ورسوله وتعزروه وتوقروه وتسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا. إن الذين يبايعونك إنما يبايعون الله يد الله فوق أيديهم فمن نكث فإنما ينكث على نفسه ومن أوفى بما عاهد عليه الله فسيؤتيه أجرا عظيما. سيقول لك المخلفون من الأعراب شغلتنا أموالنا وأهلنا فاستغفر لنا. يقولون بألسنتهم ما ليس في قلوبهم قل فمن يملك لكم من الله شيئا إن أراد بكم ضرا أو أراد بكم نفعا بل كان الله بما تعملون خبيرا. بل ظننتم أن لن ينقلب الرسول والمؤمنون إلى أهليهم أبدا وزين ذلك في قلوبكم وظننتم ظن السوء وكنتم قوما بورا. ومن لم يؤمن بالله ورسوله فإنا أعتدنا للكافرين سعيرا. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض يغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء وكان الله غفورا رحيما. سيقول المخلفون إذا انطلقتم إلى مغانم لتأخذوها ذرونا نتبعكم يريدون أن يبدلوا كلام الله قل لن تتبعونا كذلكم قال الله من قبل فسيقولون بل تحسدوننا بل كانوا لا يفقهون إلا قليلا. صدق الله مولانا العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله الصادق الأمين محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين الشاكرين الحامدين العابدين التائبين السائحين وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وصل اللهم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. صلوات على محمد وعلى آل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Inshallah, we'll continue, dear brothers and sisters, with our reading of Dua 44 of As-Sahifatu Sajjadiyah. We were in this section where the Imam والسلام, is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to tighten the bonds of the kin. So we'll mention a few closing points and then we'll move to the neighbors. So in speaking of the kin, family, we spoke of the parents a bit, we spoke of the spouse, more so focusing on maybe the duties of the husband. And then of course there's much more to be said here, the relationships that exist between the siblings and of course between a parent and their children. But also we have to remember that the extended relatives fall within this category of kin too. Grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins. These are people that, again, we're expected to maintain relationships with. And if you notice, within Islam, these connections will exist, whether we have firm relationships or not. One of the areas that we see this is within the distribution of a person's asset after they die, the inheritance. The inheritance in Islam has a designated formula, right? So people that are related to you, depending on the proximity of their relation to you and who is alive and who is not alive, they will receive inheritance from you. So in certain circumstances, let's say you don't have, spouse, you don't have parents, you may not have, children or any siblings, your relatives will inherit from you. Your uncles and your aunts may inherit from you. Your cousins may inherit from you. So from the Islamic perspective, even keeping relations with them and keeping strong bonds with them is an important thing too. And if we look to the riwayat, basically what we're told is the establishment of strong relationships with the relatives, with the kin, produces a few effects. So in an example, we look to, again, Marhum Kulayni's Al-Kafi, and looking to narration from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam, stating, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa Silatul arham, that means the bonds amongst the relatives, the good relations amongst the relatives. First, tuzakki al-a'mal, they will purify a person's actions. Any action that we do has some impurities, right? And through these goodly relations, Allah will look past those imperfections and reward us with the purity of the action that we have. Number two, وَتُنْمِ الْأَمْوَالِ, and it will increase the wealth. Again, we see this bond. We said last night, the night before, a strong relationship with the parents, support of the parents, being supported by the parents. All of these will also lead to happiness in life, success in life, satisfaction in life. So again, the relatives is the same way. Now, you may have a wonderful relation with your relatives and you may not be financially in a position that you want to be. It doesn't mean that you will become wealthy in a way that it's societally understood, but it will increase the wealth. At the very least, we have in cases that it repels sometimes financial losses, right? So it's hard to keep track of what those are when we don't know them. وَتَدْفَعُ الْبَلْوَى, it repels the afflictions. Again, the hardships in life, the difficulties in life, the challenges in life, the good relations will also limit these. Now, sometimes trying to have a good relation with the relatives leads to some of the balaya, that, some of the hardships, because we may have difficult relationships with them. There may be a history there may be a past there that we have to work through. But if we're able to strive towards a good relation, the riwayah says that it also repels the afflictions. وَتُسَيِّرُ الْحِسَابِ وَتُنْشُئُ فِي الْأَجَلِ, it helps in the affairs of the hereafter, in that it makes the reckoning, it makes the hisab of the afterlife easier for us, and it also makes the occurrence of death delayed. This delaying of death is a theme that we see consistently throughout all these riwayat. A person who has a good connection with their relatives, maintains a constant connection with them, then Allah will extend their lifetime. A case here that, again, is narrated from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. I'll just read a portion of it. He states, مَا نَعْلَمُ شَيْئًا يَزِيدُ فِي الْعُمُرِ إِلَّا صِلَةِ الرَّحِمِ. We know nothing that extends a person's lifespan like that of a relation with one's relatives. Okay. So, the basic point, like we said, is this, is that to build a successful life, to build a harmonious life, to build a happy life, a person cannot do that individually, cannot do that by themselves. They need the help of other people, right? Whether it's our own personal happiness, whether it's the safety, the security, the support of our family, whether it's the establishment of a community, whether it's living in an equitable society, a harmonious society, all of those require good relations with other people. And it begins with the family, it begins with the kin. Islam wants to teach us that where we're supposed to kind of practice to sharpen the relationships that we have with people should happen with the family. And we have our successes and failures there. So let's use the family not as a experimenting ground, but as a place that we can, there's enough of a hospitality, if we want to call it, that if a person makes a mistake or a person is trying to learn something new, a person is trying to excel at a skill, let there be enough room within the family to allow for that. And let us not treat each other like we treat outsiders and treat people who are not necessarily related to us by blood or through marriage. Okay, let's move on. Then the Imam states in this same position, وَأَن نَتَعَاهَدَ جِيرَانَنَا بِالْإِفْضَالِ وَالْعَتِيَةِ. Oh Allah, allow us to attend to our neighbors with giving and with bestowal, with gifts, with kindness. Again, in the Quran, there is a special emphasis that the respect that is due to the neighbor, the obligation that is due to the neighbor, is not because of societal norms. It is not just because being pleasant. It is not because you have a mutual gain, that if you're good with the neighbor, then the neighbor is good with you. If you trust the neighbor, then the neighbor will trust you. If you are respectful of the neighbor, then the neighbor is respectful of you. That's bargaining. You know, I'm not going to make a lot of noise in my place of residence, so the neighbor also does not reciprocate. I will not have guests over every day of the night and of the week, so my neighbor does not reciprocate. You know, all of these things, a lot of times if we look at it, it's transactional. I'm doing this, so I will receive the like in response. That's, again, not a bad thing. That's a very similar to kind of like this golden rule of do as you like to be done to you. Fine. But the basic intention is if it's simply transactional, then it's only good as far as you are benefiting. So let's say you have a neighbor that is not so friendly, not so nice, does not reciprocate. Then what will you do? Will you respond in kind? The responding in kind, because the nature is only transactional, will only lead to the erosion of your relationship, and your, the locality will only suffer. So in the Quran, it brings the neighbor in the category of the peoples that have special rights. وَعْبُدُوا اللَّهِ, worship Allah, وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا, associate not partners with Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, like we mentioned, be kind to your parents or do good to your parents. وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى, and your near ones that we just mentioned. وَالْيَتَامَى, the orphans. وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, the needy. وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى, and the near neighbor. وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. See, this is in the Quran. When Quran speaks of a certain group of peoples, it's because it's important, it's drawing attention to it. Also, وَالْجَارِ الْجُنُبِ, and also the companion at your side. So your near neighbors, but especially your immediate neighbors, you want to call your immediate companion, your immediate person who's alongside you. وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, and the traveler. وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, and those that your right hand possesses or your hands possess, your workers or your slaves in previous context. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ مُخْتَالًا فَخُورًا. Indeed, Allah does not like the arrogant, the boastful. So look at all the kind of the groups that this ayah is speaking about, right? It's speaking as close as family, your parents. It's speaking about the needy in society, the orphans, the disenfranchised. It's speaking about the travelers. It's speaking about people who work under you or you are in a position of power. And then it includes the neighbor here too. And at the end, the ayah states, it comments that Allah does not like a boastful, arrogant individual. So a successful relationship with a neighbor is one that allows a person to have that arrogance, that boastfulness in check. Now, again, an observation personally that I have, I don't think many of us have relationships with our neighbors that we're arrogant. I don't care what my neighbor thinks of me, I'm going to do what I want. No, we're, I think, reasonable people generally. But I think the reflection that is due here, and I mentioned this a few nights ago, in the circumstances that we're living in, is thinking about what it means to be a neighbor. First, in a kind of a non-Islamic, or not a non-Islam, but towards your non-Muslim neighbors, but also what it means to be neighbors with Muslims in a basic locality. Now, in the riwayat, as I mentioned before, there is an establishment of a responsibility that you have towards your neighbors within 40 houses. So think of however your neighborhood, your development structured. 40 houses that surround you, you have neighborly obligations and responsibilities. Okay? So the basic of that, and again, we have this in the statements riwayat that he said, don't be a burden to your neighbor. Okay. Alaikum assalam. In some cases, a person who is a burden or a bother to their neighbor, they will not smell the scent of the paradise. Man آذى جاره حرم الله عليه ريح الجنة ومأواه جهنم. His place will be in a due punishment. But beyond that, it's not just about not bothering one another. That's kind of restricting the destructive side, but there's also a constructive side too. See, again, in cases, especially as a tribute to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, it says, the status of the neighbor is so high. That means it was said to me of the status of the neighbor so much that I was under the impression that the neighbor inherits from the other. So he said, relatives will inherit whether we like it or not, depending on where they are in that line. And Allah says you have to have good relations. But neighbor can be a totally stranger. Nothing in common. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, though, that the way that I was told of the right of the neighbor, I thought they would inherit. So what does that mean then? See, with the family, we have a certain expectation that I can trust them, I can entrust my affairs to them, right? In some of the literature that we have of brotherhood, of sisterhood, it says, treat your brother and sister in such a way that in your absence, they will be protective of your property, of your assets, of your family. You can entrust your assets, your most valuable things to them. I'm going on a trip. Am I going to ask someone to kind of look after my family, look after my affairs, look after my house? I'm not here for 2 weeks. Can you, check on my family from time to time? In these days, I have a phone. I will always call them, right? Sure. But when they're not picking up the phone, what are you going to do? You're going to teleport there? Or when you don't have access, or when your family is experiencing a discomfort that they cannot express to you. The neighbor plays a similar role. The type of a relationship that you're trying to build starts at just being respectful and cordial. That's the bare minimum. But you build on that to the point that you have a trust and an understanding amongst each other that you feel like you're supporting one another in your lives, in your livelihood, in your living. So for the non-Muslim, there are a few very simple things that I think we as Muslims can do, and you know better than I, that can help advance that relationship, right? Especially in a society that is incredibly fractured culturally, incredibly fractured politically, incredibly fractured, or diverse, I'm going to call it diverse religiously. If you fear for yourself, your family, your property, whatever, you have someone that lives in your locality that you think is no good, fine, limit your relations with them. But people who are they're just people, they're good people. They don't necessarily live the way that you live or see the world the way that you see the world. It doesn't mean that you should not have at least an open line of communications with them. Now, I'm just as guilty as anyone else in this crowd that doesn't do this, but having an open line of communication with your neighbors is an Islamic practice. Introducing yourself to your neighbors is an Islamic practice. Having some excuse to maintain connections with them is an Islamic practice. Now, you don't have to have your neighbor in your home. You say, my neighbor is not Ahl Kitab. If I bring him in the home, then the whole home will become najis potentially. Okay, fine. No problem. Don't invite him inside. Maybe have a special room that if you want to invite people, have a special room in your home for that. You accommodate them. Don't tell, I can't let you in for religious reasons. But maintain that relationship that your neighbor at least knows your name. I remember once I was at my in-laws' place, and I had met their neighbors before. The mailman came and said, where's so-and-so's house? And I just stared at him. And he looked at me. He said, you don't know your neighbors? You don't know the name of your neighbor? I was embarrassed. And I don't know if you could tell I'm Muslim or not. If you knew who I was in Muslim, that's even worse. It's the worst kind of PR that we can have. Who are these loving Muslim people that don't even know the names of their neighbors, right? So at least having something like that. And then now the kids want to play together. You want from time to time to, this month of Ramadan, it's Eid, here's a gift, here's some sweets, here's whatever. To make them feel comfortable with you. So at least that basic level of protection and reciprocity exists. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, I think, in that perspective. That's a part of, building relations with your community. But beyond that, when it comes to the responsibilities amongst Muslims, see, when it speaks about neighbors, many of these, it assumes that your neighbors are going to be predominantly Muslim. Not always, but you can take in many cases for granted. So your Muslim neighbor, to have that level of trust that you can turn to them, they can turn to you, because we generally don't live next to each other in the same neighborhood, that 40-house responsibility, I would imagine, there's some justification for trying to extend that to at least, 40, if not 44 people that live in your locality, so Muslims know where they live amongst each other. I'm not saying map it out. This becomes a sensitive document. It's a map of all the Muslims in there, all the Shia, all the members of the community in what area. No, but at least know who your proximate Muslim neighbors are, so you can build a relationship with them, so you can have some sort of semblance of what it means to live in a Muslim community, so that when you have Islamic affairs, you have Islamic functions, you have Islamic needs, you know where to turn to. So if a person has a personal need, they know where to turn to. There's a riwayah narrated from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. He states, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It says, min husn al-jiwar tafaqqud al-jar. Among the signs of a good neighbor is to be informed of your neighbor. A good sign of a neighbor, to be informed of your neighbor. Informed of your neighbor doesn't mean to, pry in their life. But it means to generally know what's going on. Know of their health, know of the state of their family, know who their children are, know what things are of interest to them, know what things maybe they could use support of, these sorts of things. And it again takes for granted that you gain this through kind of like frequent visitation. If you at least see each other at the masjid or outside the homes, another way of having a better appreciation of who a person is to spend time in that person's home. Again, I'm not here preaching. I'm just here sharing reflections. So I'm more guilty than anyone. None of you are guilty, but I am of the guilty people. But I'm interested to know of a community, especially established communities that are not in the middle of nowhere, what percentage of the community has attended at least the house of the other community member once in their lifetime? Say there's 100 families in this area. What is the percentage that a family and another family in the community have visited each other's homes at least once for the duration of their relationship? See, when we come to masjid, and the program's 2 hours long, right? And it's in the middle of the week, and we have to drive, and we have a million things to do. If I see you, salam, alaikum salam, how are you? Oh, good, I'm good. How are you? Good? Are you good? Okay. You see something, some obvious thing of the person. Oh, I see you're growing your beard out. Oh, I see like you have a bump on your head. Oh, I can see that your belly is coming. Oh, these sorts of things. I see it, mashallah. I make an observation. How are you? Alhamdulillah. Teek, all these things. Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. Good. But maybe that person has a serious issue that if there was a deeper relationship, the person would feel comfortable and come and say, hey, listen, maybe I need help with something. If it's just, okay, you can't say like, oh, I have massive depression. Can you please, I need someone to talk to. Or again, I'm having difficulty with one of my children. I really need a brother to turn to just express myself. Get some advice. If it's just those kind of like superficial sort of exchanging of pleasantries, it's really hard for a person to break that and then just come out and be very vulnerable and intimate with the person, right? You have to build that relation. You have to build that trust. Now, I live in Maryland, so I'm too far from you, so don't come ask me, okay? Go ask your neighbors. My point is this: someone who's in close proximity with you, that should build a network of support for these sorts of things. Now, there's some shared concerns that all of us have. It doesn't matter if my child goes to a different school that your child goes. You may have concerns of, the things that my children are learning in the school system, fine. But there may be things that a person who is local can better appreciate what's going on. Building those relationships allows us to have those conversations. Visiting one another allows us to observe, not pry, observe the living situations of each other. We shared that story yesterday of one ulama. They were living simply. Family would come to the home. They were observant of things. They knew it was bothersome to the family. Imagine if we were attending the homes of each other, of members of the community, you can see an opportunity. Hey, I'd love for you to be my neighbor. The home next door is going for sale. And you figure out, okay, maybe this is not within the budget of the person to come. You'd love for them to be your neighbor, but it's out of budget. Either you're going to be so generous and say, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Down payment, mortgage payment, taken care of. I don't know how many generous people we have like that, or even that type of generosity is possible. But beyond that, maybe there can be a sort of thinking or strategizing. At the least, you make a dua. Oh Allah, provide for him. I want him to become my neighbor. Make it happen. Or, oh Allah, I can see maybe they have a few children. How can I be of service to that family to ensure next time that house goes for sale, or maybe the other house in the neighborhood goes for sale, that this brother or sister Muslim can come and buy this house? Again, not prying. Show me your tax returns. Let me see. No, not like that. But maybe we work in a similar field. How can I help you advance in your career? See your children going to these schools. What are they saying? How can I open a door? How can I use what's available to me to better help you, neighbor? Now, it may be people who live in Delran, or maybe people who live on the other side of Philly. That's fine. 40 people. And because there isn't, I don't think there's like a strong, like a firm Islamic basis of 40 people, you can pick and choose. I don't like the 39th person that's closer to me. I'll choose one that's a little, fine, whatever. But find at least a number of families that you can feel like you can be in a relationship with. And make it a part of what you do to build those relationships with one another. Right? In Islam, one of the things that they say, the neighbor has such a right that maybe they would inherit. One of the ahkam that we have, the rulings that we have, an Islamic type of way of life is, when a person wants to sell their home, who should get first dibs? Not the person who bids the highest and pays cash and doesn't have any conditions. It's the neighbor. The neighbor should have first dibs. Now, you don't have to take a financial loss, but the offer should be there as a right that you've grown with one another. Hey, maybe this person wants to bring family here. Maybe this person wants to bring a friend or a community member here. You make that offering to them. So in thinking about what it means to be neighbors and neighborhood in a place that we're living, in a time that we're living, that we really don't have the opportunities to just decide we're going to live next to each other and set up a local masjid, we really have to be a little bit, have to think a little outside the box. So using the instructions of Ahlul Bayt, let us try to use this month to increase the frequency of our visitations to each other's homes. Someone is not inviting you to their home, you invite them. You invited them once and they didn't return the invitation, invite them a second time. You invited them twice, they didn't return the invitation, invite them 3 times. After the 3rd time, maybe invite someone else. I don't know. But go out of your way to show that you want to establish that relationship. Okay, let's move on. Risala salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. I'm going to skip a bit of the dua just to move to another section that I think is closely related. After this dua says, وَأَنُّ طَاهِرَهَا بِإِخْرَاجِ الزَّكَوَاتِ. It's going to speak about the purification of one's wealth. But after that, then the Imam states, وَأَن نُرَاجِعَ مَنْ هَاجَرَنَا. Oh Allah, allow me in this month to return to the person who has gone far away from me, who has gone far away from us. وَأَن نُرَاجِعَ مَنْ هَاجَرَنَا. For us to return to the people who have gone away from us. So we're talking about building strong relations, right? And in trying to do that, we're not always successful. We may do something or say something that upsets another person. Our relationships may sour. People may sulk. And they have to separate. 2 brothers in the masjid, something happened, they're upset with one another. We weren't able to reconcile between them. They're both upset, or one is upset with one of them, they can't stand the sight of them. 2 members of the family, 2 siblings, 2 relatives, spouses. Life is full of these kind of like separations and coming togethers. Now sometimes we have the strength to do it ourselves. I make a mistake, and I'm able to recognize that I've made a mistake, and I again have the courage to accept that I've made a mistake, and I initiate the return. Or, I was wronged, and hypothetically, I was wronged, I did not make a mistake, but it has led to the separation of me from someone else. Because I value the relationship with that person, I will initiate a return to the person. And maybe not even with this condition stipulated that they have to apologize to me and accept fault. Some of these things we're just not able to resolve in this lifetime. We need a judge that is all-seeing, all-hearing, all-knowing. That hisab will happen in the hereafter. But again, because we value these relationships, the Imam is saying, Allah grant us the strength to go back to the people who have left us. 2 small kind of like reflections I want to share of where I think there's prime opportunity for us to work on this. Number 1 is people who are of the same sort of thinking, the same sort of outlook in life, the same sort of lifestyle, the same sort of worldview. Muslims, committed Muslims, that through the basic affairs in life, their relationships are soured or fractured. There needs to be enough strength within the community. There needs to be enough strength amongst the neighbors. There needs to be enough strength among the families for people to serve as conduits for the reconciliation of parties. Everyone stands there and says, none of my business. It doesn't concern me. No one asked me. Then what, we're really just standing on the sidelines and observing. Oh, that's too bad. 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 Right? Again, there needs to be a right way to approach this, but the basic orientation should be there should be enough support within the community structure that we care about and we're able to interject in a correct way when we find that relationships have fractured. This was traditionally the responsibility of the elders. We've spoken a lot about cultural sensitivity. From what I can understand, in many cultures, it was the role of the elder to play the role of reconciliation. And so the Quran speaks of this. It says, حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلٍ and حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. It doesn't say an elder person, but it says an individual, a person with judgment, with wisdom, with life experience. Let them come in the middle and serve as a point of reconciliation. I'm not sure who's supposed to play that role. I don't think it should be one person. If you have a strong leader of the community, you have a strong practicing scholar that can do that, that is within his or her toolkit, fine, utilize that. If not, there should at least be some sort of a committee, a conglomerate, an understanding amongst the community to have first an appreciation of the status of the relationships, and second, some sort of a program to ensure that those fractured relationships are attended to. Too many examples of lost opportunities that we could have come in the middle, have been a source of some good, but for one reason or another, we didn't. Major culprit, we were just unaware of each other's lives. We're so ignorant of what's happening in each other's lives because we don't have those strong relationships. We can't know until it's too late. Or if we do, there's a discomfort that's there that we can't get over. Or God forbid, there is an illness in our hearts that enjoys to observe it more than to interject and put an end to it. Something for me to gossip about. Al-a'yadhu billah, something like that. That's an illness. That's the first thing. The second thing, like I said, within the larger community. The second thing, وَنُرَاجِعَ مَنْ هَاجَرَنَا. See, I'm sure, I don't know about this area, but I'm sure that the people who could potentially be in a communitarian relationship are probably double, if not triple, the crowd that not has come tonight, but generally will come here. The people who want to perhaps be Muslim and live Muslim and engage in Muslim relationships are probably much more than those who actually come to the masjid. Now, it's not about whose fault it is, whose fault it isn't. It's just about there's many people that have been drawn away from associating with a place like this, with practices that are Islamic because of one reason or another. This month of Ramadan is almost like the Imam is saying, make it as part of your program to seek out these individuals. Go hear their story. I'm not seeing you. What's going on? Or purposefully, clearly that this person has a grievance. Hear their grievance. Record their grievance. Bring attention to the grievance. Help them work through those grievances. Sometimes it's not against another person. It's just the difficulty of life. You speak of a merciful God, but my life is nothing but hardship. It's nothing. My life is a hell. Okay, that person's seeking out, asking out for support. I want to live an Islamic life, but the pressures of society are too much, and the standards that you hold are too much, so I can't. It's embarrassing for me to come here. You speak of like all these good things, but I'm living my life the best that I can, but I'm not doing any of these things, so I don't belong here. So naturally, I go places where they're accepting of me. This whole talk of like the attraction and saving of the younger generation. Many of them have emigrated away from, or they've been pushed away from, or they've been dismissed, or they've been repelled. This month of Ramadan is the month to think about them, to identify them, to work towards bringing them back. How much of the plan that we have as a part of Ramadan programming is oriented towards that? I don't know. There are other subset of this that we can speak about. Incarcerated community is another one of these communities that there needs to be definitely a lot of time spent. Revert community, especially those who come, are not welcomed and leave. There's so many instances of this, but the basic idea is that there is a need for you and I to go out of our way to try to welcome someone back, to draw someone back. How much of that is really a part of what we understand to be of the Ramadan spirituality beyond just reading the du'as? We can read Iftatah every night, but if we're not paying attention to what's being said in Iftatah, then we'll read this perpetually for years and years and years and years. وَقِلَّةِ عَدَدِنَا وَشِدَّةَ الْفِتَنِ بِنَا وَتَظَاهُرَ الزَّمَانِ عَلَيْنَا. The louder we yell, the worse the situation gets, because Allah says, pay attention to these things. Inshallah, it's time for adhan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those that in this month of Ramadan we capitalize to strengthen the bonds with kin, with members of the family, with those who have gone away from us, inshallah. Risalat salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Let us recite a Surah Al-Fatiha for all of the marhumeen of the sponsors of tonight and all the marhumeen of mu'mineen and mu'minat, especially Sayyid Altaf Hussein Shah, Sayyida Karim Khatoon, Shahid Aqdas Kazmi, Shahid Aqdas Kazmi, Sayyid Nazir Begum, Sayyid Hamid Ali Shah, Sayyida Zia Zahra, Agha Zainul Abidin, Zamir Zahra, Sayyida Sughra Bibi, Sayyid Nazir Hussein Shah, Sayyid Mazhar Hussein Shah, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد